You're listening to Syntax, the podcast with the tastiest web development treats out there. Strap yourself in and get ready. Here is Scott Talinsky and Wes Boss.
Welcome to Syntax, the podcast with the tastiest developer tools treats. Today we've got a banger for you on the Dev Tools Elements tab specifically. One of our last episode was on a couple of the miscellaneous tabs in Dev Tools, what they do, where they're handy. That episode did really, really well, and we said we would go in and do an entire episode just on the Elements tab because there's so much that you can do. So the idea behind this one is that we're going to dive into the Elements tab and talk about the features and, more importantly, like when you'd use them. Like, oh, this is handy if you ever have to do X, Y, and Z, because these are not necessarily things that you'll use every single day, but when you have an issue, it's very quick to solve if you know how to use the dev tools properly. We are sponsored by Linode, Linux Cloud Hosting, Sentry, Error Exception Performance Tracking, and Mux Video and APIs and hosting for your video platform. Talk about them partway through the episode. I'm Wes Boss. With me, as always, is Mr. Scott Talinsky. How you doing?
Hey, I'm doing good. My computer is not, though. We just recorded 2 episodes. I have not changed anything about my setup, and all of a sudden my frames per second here of my mouse cursor is now dragging. So,
is your battery low?
Battery is not low.
Did I ever tell you about that issue I had with the canvas?
With the canvas,
I was doing like canvas drawing app, and all of a sudden it was like buttery smooth, and then all of a sudden it got like really jaggedy to the point where like the drawing didn't look good. And I spent forever debugging it, and it turned out to be low battery in my mouse, and it was just not sending mouse move events as frequently as it was.
Oh yeah, that is not this, but that happens all the time with this trackpad. You know what? One of the things I learned how to do from Wes Boss was to get those braided cables with the 3 heads on it.
So good.
I have one sticking out from underneath my laptop. So I never am searching for power for my trackpad or my keyboard. I just alternate between keyboard or trackpad, which one's getting the juice. So they're always fully juiced up. You know that. I honestly have no idea. It says Zoom is the culprit. So we'll see if there's any issues here, but I don't think so. Maybe Discord too. Discord, Notion, who knows? All of the stuff we're using right now, except for maybe Discord. But I'm doing good, man. I'm super sick. I can hardly talk.
Not the good kind of sick.
Yeah, not the good kind of sick. Just so many things. And it's a Brittany and Kevin chaotic over here. So that's how it is.
All right. Well, let's get into it. Let's talk about the very basics of the Elements tab. Then we'll get into some of the styles, talk about the different panels within the Elements tab. We'll talk about some JavaScript DOM things that you can use to figure out and debug your JavaScript, and then a couple more little things. You want to kick it off with the Elements tab?
Yeah, the Elements tab is the tab that, you probably have spent the most time in. Because typically what happens, you either use the keyboard shortcut, you right-click on something, or whatever, you inspect an element, right? And in fact, so many people have always referred to the developer tools as like the inspect element. Oh, I'm going to inspect element. And that's what you do. Even non-developers. It's funny. I listen to some podcasts where they'll be like, you know how to get around this error about, selling you your ad blockers off? You click on this thing and click inspect element and then click delete.
Yeah.
It's like funny to hear non-web people talk about it.
Even my wife can do it, and she can get the URL of an image where it's set to a background. Because, sometimes you can't right click copy image on an image. She knows how to do it. I'm so proud.
But so the element tab is really what's showing you, it's, believe it or not, it's not the DOM itself, but it's an HTML representation of the DOM. And so you get to see all of the HTML as it is in the DOM at the very moment that you are looking at the site at any given point. And you can click on any element. You can get their styles. You can get their anything in there. And you can actually, believe it or not, some people don't know this, but you can manipulate this fairly easily. So if we wanted to edit something, there's a whole host of options. If you have an individual div and you want to move it, guess what? All you got to do is click and drag it. You can put something inside of something. You can really go to town editing HTML here. I know it's a low-key thing, and some people just maybe have never tried it. You can move and modify your DOM quite a bit. One thing that I use a lot is if you right-click on any element, you can do edit as HTML. What this does is it opens essentially a fairly decent-sized text area, which isn't formatted super well, but It allows you to edit the HTML as is, or even just copy it. If you wanted to copy it or change it, you can click it, you can edit it, you would then hit enter, and it saves it and updates the actual browser window. So you can get in there and really, really tweak that DOM as much as you want.
Did you say that you could drag and drop them as well?
I did.
Yeah, I find that handy when you're using, like you're doing like a tricky layout and something needs to be like a direct child of something. And instead of having to move it in your template because that maybe gets in the way or is annoying, you can literally just drag and drop that up a level and then to see, oh, okay, that's what I wanted. I had indented one level too deep.
Yeah. You can also delete things if you just highlight something and click the backspace button, it deletes it. I use that fairly frequently. Again, we just kind of mentioned it as something you can do to remove banners that like pop up and get in the way. It's like, would you like to log in? No, thank you. I do not want to log into Pinterest just to see this image. I'm going to click the delete there.
Oh, I hate that.
Yeah. My wife and I were just talking about, what's a killer web app? Just Pinterest that isn't crappy. Just make Pinterest and then give the users an option to import all of their Pinterest pins and then just make it better. That's right there. Pinterest hasn't changed in a gazillion years.
Yeah, Pinterest is awful. There's like a couple other apps like that where you try to use the like Reddit mobile or not. No, yeah, Reddit mobile. Every single time that you visit it, it's like, do you want to open the desktop app? And then
Seriously.
You like click on a comment and it loads like 3 comments and then you have to click on like load more and like, come on, guys. I know you're trying to like boost engagement and whatever. There's some big buck up top making you do all these things, but it's an awful experience.
Yeah, totally. That's right for the picking. In addition to like deleting things, you can also right click and add an attribute to add anything. You can click into the element to add an attribute or change a class name or anything like that. All that stuff is really pretty neat. And I don't know if you have, I know you've been in Firefox land for a little bit, but Chrome recently got a whole host of really great Flexbox tools. And now if you have a div that is a flex element in the Elements tab, there'll be like a little label next to that div and it just says Flex. And it's actually a button, believe it or not. And if you click on that button, it opens up the Flex tools for this. And you can see if you have it selected, it's like a toggle. What you can see is the actual Flex grid, the same way that you have been able to in Firefox for quite some time. And that's like just endlessly helpful. Whether you have a Flex or a grid, you can toggle that on and you can see it. You can see the gap. And when I click the grid on something, you get the size of all the segments. You get the numbers of all the segments, the gutters, the gap, all that stuff. The same way that you have in Firefox, and that's been so awesome there.
Those little buttons beside the element that tell you if something is Flex, Grid, has an event attached to it, or Firefox added one that tells you if it scrolls, which is handy because if you have like 800 nested divs and you want to know which one is not causing the scrolling, but which one is scrolling, then it's really, really nice to see that. I forever have wanted... Tell me what thing is causing the scrolling, not which thing. People are always like, use Firefox to check the scroll thing. I'm like, no. That tells you which element is scrolling, but it doesn't tell you which one is making it scroll. For my website, I put this little border around my website and I did some trickery with before and after. And I'm paying for that because I always have horizontal scroll issues pop up, especially with the Gatsby image that's flexible, but it's worth it. I think I just have to keep figuring out what these little issues are.
Yeah, there's a lot of neat stuff in here that you don't even think about. One cool thing, have you ever used this break on?
Yes. Yeah, a lot. The break on, what is it? With the possible options, break on.
Subtree modifications, attribute modifications, and node removal.
That's really handy because if you want to insert a breakpoint into your JavaScript and you don't know what JavaScript is causing this thing to change or to be removed or to be added, you can just add those break on. And that's a breakpoint in your JavaScript that will freeze everything from running and it will show you the actual code. So if you're jumping into an older code base or a code base you haven't worked on before and you're saying like, okay, I have no clue. When I hover this thing, it like accidentally removes some HTML. What code is causing that? That's a great use case for that. Mm-hmm. We also have scroll into view. So if you are on an element, you can right click, scroll into view. You can also do this from the dev tools. If you have an element in your dev tools and you can run scroll into view. And that is just a regular JavaScript API.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm assuming that the DevTools uses that. And that's a really, really handy one, both for your application, but also for debugging. If you want to be able to, okay, I'm working on this node and it's in a list of 1,000 things. Where is this thing? Without having to put a background color on it, you can scroll it into view. Another kind of cool thing is that if you're in your console and you have an element selected, you can right click on that in your console and say reveal in inspector, which is inspector is the word for the elements tab in Firefox. And then it will just select it. And being able to go from inspector to console with $1, $2, $0, those will give you the most recently selected elements from your inspector tab in your console. And then being able to go back from your console to your inspector with that select in DevTools is so handy. I use that all the time. I think we touched upon this in the console one. If you have an element selected in your elements tab and you want to be able to access that DOM node in your console, you can use the $0 and that will give you the actual element. And then if you want the second last thing that you clicked, you can use $1 and then $2, $3, $4, and then it stops at $4. So you get the 5 most recent elements that you have clicked on. And that can be handy if you want to be able to quickly add an event listener or be able to check something out.
Cool. Another thing you can do is an expand or collapse recursively or just this one div. And that could be really helpful if you want to just get things out of the way. You know, it does feel like this elements tab is very much a full featured part of the thing. But a lot of people just look at it as like, here's the DOM, you can click on it to get the styles, but you can really do a lot more here than you might expect and to navigate or understand a little bit about your code base.
Another little tip I have is we're talking about what is causing the horizontal scroll or what is causing this thing to goof up. What I'll do in that case is literally just delete DOM nodes. So,
oh yeah, same.
What's the name for this type of finding? There's like a special name for the finding where
something by removal.
Yeah, I'll take like the entire application and I'll break it down into the top level header, content, footer, and I'll delete it. Mm-hmm. If that doesn't fix it, Control Z, it will put it back in. Delete the middle one. If that doesn't fix it, Control Z, and then delete the footer. And then when you find out, okay, it was part of one of these big top 3, then you move into the one that actually caused it and you go a little lower and you sort of try to figure out that, or you select like half the elements and delete those. And then if it went away, then okay, the issue is in those first 8. So then break that into the first 4 and the last 4, and then break that into the first 2. And then eventually you're going to find out what is the parent. And then you keep drilling down more and more until you actually find the actual element that you're having. So being able to quickly delete items as well as reinstate them if you accidentally did delete them, that is something a lot of people don't know that you can do that instead of just display nunning on the element.
Oh, and one neat thing, Wes, about your little scroll view issue is that there's a tab called the Layers tab. That's what I actually use primarily for debugging, that type of thing. So if you go to the split window, the panel that's at the bottom, and you click the 3 little dots that are right next to console, is it layers in here? What is it actually? It's layers in Firefox. It might be rendering in Chrome. So Wes, actually, one way that I solved that error that you're talking about scrolling and finding something that is like the overflow scroll and like maybe pushing that is I use the layers panel. Now, if you head to your developer tools in the very top right, you'll see 3 little dots. Click those 3 dots. There's a whole other thing called more tools where there's a handful of more tools. And we've talked about this panel in the last DevTools episode. And I've talked about the fact that there's all these other tools in here. But one of them that I really love to use is the layers tool.
Ooh, I've never used this.
Layers gives you a 3D rendering of your site. And Firefox had this before Chrome did. And the Firefox version was fantastic. The Chrome version is definitely very good as well. But it can show you all of your paints that happen. It can show you any of your scroll rectangles. It has a little like 3D thing where you can click and drag and pull around and see the site in 3D. And so when you see it in 3D, not only do you see any elements that are off canvas or on canvas, but you see their z-index and how everything stacks on top of each other.
Oh, yeah. I remember this from Firefox. I don't think it's in Firefox anymore, is it?
It's got to be, yeah. It's definitely in Firefox still. But either way, this thing allows you to see not only the z-index in a 3D context, which is extremely helpful for those of us who are more visual, but also debug things that are hanging offside of the canvas and just see where everything is on the canvas. So that's what I primarily use for that, because it honestly, when you use that layer view and you see like your header is pushed off by 10 pixels, okay, that's the problem, right?
Yeah, you can zoom right in.
You can zoom right in. So that's what I use for that. I really enjoy that style of debugging. One thing I also enjoy is working with my own virtual private servers. And a good way to do that is to use a really, really, really good service provider, something like Linode. Wes, do you want to talk about Linode?
I do. Linode is cloud computing that developers trust. So if you need infrastructure for your application, meaning you need some servers or you need somewhere to host your images, or you need a GPU, or like what most people know Linode for is you can get a Linux server for anywhere from $5 a month all the way up to some really big ones where it's dedicated. But they have block storage, object storage, backups, node balancers, DDoS protection, firewalls, dedicated CPU, literally anything you need for your running your actual infrastructure is on Linode. So I'm going to tell you, as the developer, you've got a Node app, you want to host it somewhere. Linode is where you can host that thing, and they're going to give you $100 to host your application so you can try it out. I want you to fire up a Linode server, throw Node on there, throw PM2 on there, and then throw maybe Nginx or Caddy server on there and figure out how you can run multiple apps on one server. That would be a really fun thing to learn. I personally run that setup on my own servers as well. So check it out, linode.com, linode.com/syntax. And that's going to get you $100 of free credit, which that's a lot. Thank you, Linode, for sponsoring.
Cool. So let's get into the next most, I want to say basic tab, but it's not necessarily that basic because there's a lot of stuff in here, and that's the Styles tab. Now, the Styles tab has a lot of really interesting little features, things like the :HOV, which is not a, what's that thing? The HOV lane? That's not an HOV lane. Yeah. What this is, it allows you to trigger different states for the pseudo selectors for the given element, right? People often ask, how do I debug this when it's hovered or anything like that? This is how you select the thing in the Elements tab, then you head over to the Styles tab, and then you can select Active, Focus, Focus Within, Target, Hover, Visited, Focus Visible, and be able to force that element's state. That's the best and easiest way to check the styles on that. There's also this .cls, which allows you to add a class name to the given element. This is really good if you are using a lot of maybe utility classes and you want to see what something looks like with a bunch of utility classes thrown on. You can just type them out here.
Oh, I've not used this before.
Yeah, you just type, hit enter, type, hit enter.
Oh, that's better.
Yeah, it's much better than double clicking the class string and trying to type and then maybe having a typo.
That's what I was doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's much better than that. I'm very familiar with that style as well. There's also a plus. Now, the plus is interesting because it basically adds a new style rule. And if you click plus, it just adds a new style rule with whatever you're selected. But if you click it and hold it just a little bit, it gives you the option to like what you want to actually add the style to, like which CSS file you would like to add it to. Otherwise, it just adds it to the inspector style sheet. I don't typically use this in that sort of way. If I'm doing this, I'm just clicking the plus button. But it does seem like if you wanted to override one specific style sheet and you wanted to test some sort of cascade thing, you could say, hey, put it in the specific style sheet.
That is cool. That is only on Chrome. That's not something that exists on Firefox. You can obviously add styles to your CSS, but that's via the actual CSS tab, not via the adding a quick class to it. So that's neat. Like you said, I don't think I would use that all that often, but if you are debugging some weird cascading issues, obviously adding inline is going to override everything else. But if you want to like actually see it and not just blow away everything, but fold it into the cascade, that would be really handy.
lastly, here is the primary way that not lastly in styles, but lastly in terms of like right here, is largely the way that I try out styles. When I'm trying out styles, I pretty much just click in the element style that's just below that. Element style is a basic way for you to add inline properties to your CSS. If you want to add any CSS, it's going to get treated as an inline style here. It's going to be at the highest priority, and it's going to override, with the exception of something maybe marked important, which is probably another good reason to never use important unless you absolutely have to, right? So this is pretty much what I do. And what's cool about this window is I'm used to designing in the browser a bit. So if you're used to writing a whole bunch of CSS, you get some nice auto completion, you click around here, you get some little helpers, some color widgets and stuff. Then you can just highlight this all, select it, copy, paste it right into your code. You're good to go. So if you're designing in browser, that's certainly one way to do it. So there's also the computed tab here. The computed tab basically lets you know what style an element has. This is the ultimate list of what the final styles on this specific thing are. And there's a show all checkbox. That show all checkbox just shows every single property, even the implicit ones that you have not assigned, but like box shadow none on something that doesn't have a box shadow, right? So little things like that. So I usually leave that checkbox unchecked because that can be a giant PIA to have a giant list of styles, and then you can get only the ones that you want here. But you can also type in here and filter if you want to see what specific font size is being computed. And this gives you the computed values, as in if you're using like percentages or rems or whatever, it gives you to it in pixels when you need it. There's also the layout tab. The layout tab has all of the layout stuff for grid and flexbox. Is that how it is in Firefox too? Is there a layout tab right here? Or is it like a flex tab or something?
No, there's a layout tab where you can turn on and off your flex and grid overlays, and as well as a couple of options. I'm pretty sure that they're at parity now between Firefox and Chrome, which is awesome. And then it also shows you the computed box model, which is really handy if you want to be able to see, okay, like why is this thing becoming bigger? And you can say, oh, okay, it's because of the padding or the border or the margin. It will show you exactly how that thing has been built up. But I want to talk real quickly about the computed tab, though, because it's super handy. If you want to know, like, why is this thing getting this style, even if you haven't directly applied the style, you don't have to like scroll down every inherited property. You can just go to, okay, let me see, where is it getting its color from? You click on the color and you say, okay, here is exactly the line in the CSS where it has been applied. And then if you open, at least in Firefox, if you open them up, it will show you every selector that has been applied to that. And then it will cross out the ones that have been overwritten with more specific styles.
Oh, yeah.
So is that in Firefox as well?
That's a great question, Wes. That's a question for our resident Firefox expert, Wes Boss. With more on Firefox is Wes.
It is.
Okay, cool.
Yep. Yeah. So they are exactly the same, which is great. The DevTools have been getting so good in all the browsers recently.
And, when Firefox got those grid and Flexbox tools, it was like, wow, this is the future of this stuff. And now that Chrome has it too, it's a party. You can head to the layout. You can show your grid lines, your Flexbox columns and everything. And I don't know about Firefox, but Chrome recently added the same, like in Figma or Illustrator, and you have like a line left, a line right, a line center, those little buttons with the logos on them.
Yes.
Yeah, Chrome's added those. So you can now, if you're the type of person that has a hard time remembering like justify content or any of those types of things in Flexbox or Grid, align self, align start, those kind of things, then you can actually have real buttons to click on and test them out. And it'll write the CSS for you. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Let me open it up.
I think it's in Canary right now.
Oh, that is so cool. Yeah. It being able to it's like a nice balance between like a GUI and actually, I've said this before, Flexbox and Grid are very hard to parse just looking at the code and very easy to parse when you're using a visual tool like a DevTools. So having like a little bit of extra buttons on those types of things is key.
Totally. I hear you.
In Firefox, we recently got toggle print styles, toggle light and toggle dark buttons. Those have always been available under a sort of a nested menu.
It's like a rendering in Chrome or something.
Yeah, it allows you to like emulate different like print style sheets or dark mode or light mode, or you can also often fake the GPS coordinates that are being reported from navigator.getUserMedia, all kinds of stuff in there. And just like these little nice little things that instead of having to dig deep for those, you can just turn on dark mode, light mode, because that's something that a lot of websites are starting to have. And if you are trying to debug light and dark mode, it's very simple now.
Yeah, which is great. The next one I wanted to talk about was that little panel that's in the bottom. Now, I've heard that you've been able to drag any of the tabs into the panel, but I'm not able to do that. I wonder if that's a Canary thing.
What is this panel you're talking about?
So, okay, panel. You're in your dev tools. You hit the escape key. The console pops up. The JavaScript console pops up.
Oh, yeah.
So they call that the panel. I believe they call it that. I'm not positive about that, but you can actually have this be several different things, whether it's the animations tab, which is really neat, coverage, developer resources, issues, network conditions, rendering, search, sensors, web audio, web auth, and a lot of neat stuff. But you know what? I recently saw that you've been able to drag like the network tab down there, but I'm not able to do it. Maybe I've got to fire up Canary and see if that happens. If you are able to do that, let me know what you're doing, because this little panel has always just been sort of the console to me, and pretty much the only thing I use it for, other than maybe some of the animation tools or rendering. But for the most part, this little panel here, you can get it back hitting escape, hit it, escape to open, close, whatever. Maybe you can talk about the next thing, and I'll hunt in Canary here to see if I can figure out how to get it to drag.
Hitting escape to pop the console up while you are in the Elements tab is really nice if you're trying to work with both of them. Because usually what I'll do is I'll just switch between the Elements tab and the console tab and go back and forth.
Oh, wow. I usually leave the console open in the panel and just use escape.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's interesting that you go back and forth.
Yeah, I almost always go back and forth unless I'm specifically doing it. That's what I was going to ask, what your workflow is. I find that especially when I'm recording stuff, it gets too cluttered because I bump the font size up of my console to be massive. And then there's sometimes too much stuff, but it can be super handy. The Firefox does not have the ability to put anything other than the console into this little pop-up tab, I don't believe. Oh, wait. Yeah, I'm right there.
I'm just checking to make sure my Chrome Canary is up to date. And then if it is, I've been using Brave primarily, which is fine, but like it doesn't get all the latest and greatest Chrome developer tools from Canary that I'm used to loving, So
yeah.
But I hear you on the font size thing, man. That's a very real struggle. You get oops all console sometimes when you bump up the console size way too much or your font size way too much on that.
Yeah, for the longest time, I went down the rabbit hole of trying to skin the dev tools so that the buttons would be small, but the code would be larger.
Oh.
And at least when I tried it, there was all kinds of they got rid of all the icons though. There used to be all kinds of icons beside all these tabs.
Yeah.
And it would screw that up and everything would be off and nothing would look good. So it turned out you couldn't do it without having to rewrite the entire layout. But it looks like they've probably rewritten the CSS to lay out the DevTools tab, because that's what I do in my editor, is that I bump the text up very, very large, but then I leave like sidebar and tabs big enough to be readable, but not too big that it takes up like 10% of the screen, because it's so valuable when you're doing a tutorial.
So I figured it out. Okay, here's what you do. You head to your whichever tab you want to move into the panel, the drawer, whatever you call it.
Yeah.
And then you right click on it, move to bottom, and then it pops it down there. So you could do network down there if you want. And that way you could have Elements and network open at the same time if you want.
And then you can move to top.
Isn't that handy?
That's handy. That is, especially for network.
Yeah, right. I want to have my network and HTML open, or yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's a killer feature Firefox doesn't have. I like that a lot.
Yeah, it's pretty new. I remember when it got announced, so.
I like it.
You know what else I like? I like Sentry. And I like Sentry because it tells me where my stuff is broken. If my stuff's broken, I don't want to hear about it from a user. I want to hear about it from Sentry. And I wanted to say, hey, this stuff is broken. Maybe you should take a look at it. And guess what? This was introduced in the version 3.0.1, and it was introduced by none other than Scott Talinsky. Oh, crap. Okay, I got to go fix this right now. So I love Sentry. You could click on that and then you can say, oh, make this into a GitHub issue. You can apologize to your team, say, I introduced this bug. Here's the patch to fix it. Patch is going up. New release version, click as resolved. And then, you get an email when that didn't actually fix it and you get a regression alert. And so that's really great because you can fine tune all of that stuff to be really just fit your developer workflow in the very best possible way. And I really do love that. So head on over to Sentry at sentry.io. Use the coupon code TASTYTREAT, all lowercase, all one word. You'll get 2 months for free. So thank you so much for Sentry for sponsoring all of our hasty errors and exceptions.
One other tab I really like is the fonts tab inside of the inspector, and that will tell you which font it is using, the size of the font, the line height, spacing, whether it's italic or not. And you can also turn those things on and off. So if you want to be able to quickly visualize, what would this look like if it was a little bit more line height and bold, you can just drag those sliders and see the values. And again, like that's something I think is probably better UI than just hitting your up and down arrow keys to change the actual values, especially because like things like weight go up by 100 and then your font size can go up by any number depending on how you're sizing it with rems or ems and pixels or really anything. And what I really love about this fonts tab is that it will tell you if the font being used is a web font and which web fonts are installed on the page so that you can very clearly see, okay, this is using the web font that I loaded and not like a font that's on my system. Because I've done that before where you're like, it looks good on my end. And then you forgot to actually install the web font and it's just using your system font that you have installed.
Yeah. This thing, I don't think this exists in Chrome, but it is. I really like it. There is a new Chrome tab in the developer tools called CSS Overview. And this has some of the same kind of features in there, but it's not necessarily the exact same. I do love that the fonts panel is just there. Or am I being off base here? Sorry, I don't see the fonts thing in Chrome here at all. CSS Overview does have that. What's neat is that you can click Capture Overview from the CSS Overview tab, and it tells you all about your style sheets. I'm on a website here. This is not my website. They're using 11 colors, it says, and 14 colors for text. But what's very funny is that they have 4 colors that are extremely similar. FFF, F6, F6, F5, F5, and these things are not going to be, this is not zebra striping. They got a D8 for zebra striping. So it allows you to see like really quickly at a glance all of the styles that are used. And maybe you can see
CSS Overview. Where do you get to that?
Oh, you don't get CSS Overview?
I don't think so. No, this sounds great. See, this is why we do this episode, because the things between Scott and I that we both don't know. And
well, there's too many things. Yeah.
Yeah, there's probably a lot of like things that you're learning on this episode.
There's just straight up too many things. And people want to be like, well, how do you know all this stuff? Well, some of it's just playing around, but some of it's getting to talk to Wes here about it and see the way that he works. Another one is in settings, there's a little checkbox that says, show me what's new. And that always pops up like a new window. So if you have that open, you can always be aware.
Yeah.
But this CSS Overview, I'll run through it first and I'll tell you what I can do to help you get it. It even pops up things with contrast issues, border colors, font info. It tells you like one occurrence of this font to, 783. It analyzes all of your CSS to tell you, everything about it.
Oh my gosh, I got it. It's an experiment in Chrome.
It is very good.
Oh, this is cool.
But it's not... it's not the font tab. It doesn't give you the option to toggle the fonts and whatever, but it does tell you a whole lot about your CSS.
Media query. So it gives you a list of how many elements you have. Westboss.com has 349 elements. The colors, I used 5 background colors, 3 text colors, 3 fill colors, and 3 border colors. And man, I'm actually kind of proud of this. I actually didn't drift any from using those types of things.
Yeah, I love that though. I'm actually kind of proud of this. Yeah, that's pretty, it's a great way to be.
Like it looks decent. This is so cool. All the different media queries, unused declarations. Yeah, this is cool. So go turn this on. So how you do this is you go to the cog item settings, or you just hit F1 key if you're a Windows user. I know Macs have F keys. They're just hard to type. Then you go to Experiments tab in Settings, and in there it will say CSS Overview. You check that and then close your DevTools and open it up again, and there'll be a brand new tab that says CSS Overview, and you'll be able to click a button and generate it.
Yeah, it's neat. For me, I don't remember doing any of that. I remember just showing up one day, but I very well could have. If you're the type of person who geeks out over writing like a good cascade and writing, as optimized CSS in ways that you can, then this is a really, really handy tab to have. It really gives you a high level overview. You might be at a glance at your code, it might just be tucked away in a single SAS file or a single CSS file. It might just be tucked away somewhere. But when you have it all analyzed for you in front of you and say, hey, you're using like 15 different shades of very similar gray. What's going on? Are you all right? That actually should be like a little clippy. It's like, hey, I noticed that
you good?
You have really like 8 colors that are just about the same. Everything okay?
Next up we have is the Animations tab. This is really handy. You click on an element that has an animation, and it will list out every animation on that, as well as allow you to replay it. You can just hit your space bar, kind of like it's like video editing or audio editing software. You can change the playback. So in case if you're working on like a really long animation, like I once worked on an animation of like a car driving in, and it was like 10 seconds, right? And if you're like, I don't know, if you want to speed that up, you can. Or if you want to slow it down because you want to like really get into it, you can slow that down in your DevTools without having to actually change the code, which is good because like I've certainly left those in accidentally before, and then you deploy it with the weird setting. Yeah,
there's always a time when like you are doing your like CSS animations and you're like, is this good? Like, let me break down the steps of this animation. So then you said, or even like, let's see this thing, if this thing's working like really truly correctly. Let me just throw a transition time of 10 seconds on there and just like watch it slowly move in. This is a much better way to do that without necessarily getting into it. I appreciate these tools. I was a Flash guy. I don't know how much Flash you did, but I like to work in Flash animations and After Effects. And I've had my share of animation interfaces for debugging easing curves and stuff like that. And I love having this stuff in the DevTools because I am a very visual person. So having the animations tab in there is something I do use. I don't rely on it, but it's definitely nice to be able to really debug and help your animations become more polished.
Totally. I think that's really key, is being able to, like, sometimes I do animations. I just try stuff. I'm like, it looks good. But then if you look into it and you say, oh, okay, or you can play with the easing values or whatnot, it makes it just look that much better.
One time when I worked at Ford, we had like this like crack team of UI people and dev people and all sorts of stuff. And at that time, CSS animations, they weren't like super new, but they were kind of like a technical thing. And what I would have loved would be to have this tab at that point, to be able to sit down with the designer and say, all right, let's develop some easing curves and some animations together. Because what I had to do in the past was like present several different ones to be like, is this good? Or like, and then they'd be like, oh, I need it more snappy, But like, it would be really nice to pop open the animations tab and work on that with the designer and sit down and say, well, like, what do you feel about this one? Like, how does this feel? And then you could just like tweak it that way. So definitely an underutilized tab, especially if you're working in animations at all, or CSS transitions, any of that stuff. Also underutilized part of DevTools, and this is not an add transition, is the settings cog. If you click that little settings cog, you get so many settings. There are so many settings in here. How many people have never opened this thing before? You can do so much stuff. In fact, even just that show what's new after each update. Gotta have that. Enable tab move focus, enable JavaScript source map, automatically reveal files in sidebar. I mean, there's just an endless amount of options here. But you know what my favorite tab in the settings here is? I bet you could guess what my favorite tab would be in the settings. Would you like to take a guess?
Is it throttling because you have the fastest internet in the world?
No, it's experiments, because I like new shiny stuff.
Oh, it's true.
The experiments is great because you can check a whole bunch of neat experiments, one of which is allow custom UI themes. A lot of people ask me about how I got my DevTools styled, and I use a Chrome extension to give me material theme for my DevTools. And it's gorgeous. It looks super nice. So I've posted the link to that extension in the show notes, and then you can just check this Allow Custom UI, install this extension, and you will get very, very good looking dev tools.
Next up, I don't know if this one exists. You can tell me if this is in Chrome. It's the Changes tab.
I don't know.
Changes tab will show you literally what has changed. So you click on an element and you bump the font size up, you change the background color, you do a couple things. You're like, okay, that looks good. And then you say, okay, what did I change? What did I take off and what did I add on? The Changes tab will keep track of additions and removals and modifications to that specific element. And then if you need to mirror that back to your actual source, then you have something to look at.
I found in the experiments part, I found enable new font editor tool.
Whoa.
So that wasn't there. I don't know when that became here, but font editor tool, that sounds pretty cool to me. I'm going to pop this open and see if it's a lot like that Firefox one we were just saying I wish I had in Chrome. Because if it is, that makes my day right there.
That's great. Yeah, there's some interesting stuff in here. Spotlight, not sure what that is. That sounds cool.
Yeah.
Enable new font editor tool within the styles pane. Enable automatic contrast issue reporting. It's probably a good idea to turn on.
Yep.
Enable localized dev tools. That's good if you don't speak English. Nice. Some really cool stuff in here. I love going into the experiments tab, finding all kinds of news.
Oh, so the font editor tool is so cool.
Is
you
it?
Click it and it pops open. It tells you the font family. It tells you all the fallbacks. There's little trash cans. You can delete them. There's little sliders for the font size, line height, font weight, spacing. Yes, I want this. Very much want this.
Oh, and you can choose from computed fonts, system fonts, generic families, font size. Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
This is cool. Very, very similar.
Oh, yeah.
It doesn't tell you what fonts are available on the page. Oh, no, it does. That's what computed fonts are.
Yeah.
But it doesn't tell you. One thing that Firefox does is it will tell you what the file name is.
I know. That's the one thing.
Reddit has a font called Redesign Font 2020.
That's fun. That's a fun font name.
Cool. Well, that's good to know that they're working on that.
Yeah, a lot of cool stuff. And again, it just pop in there from time to time. You might find the one missing panel that you were just saying on a podcast episode didn't exist. So who knows what's in there?
There you go.
And also, you might find a little bit about video stuff. I don't know. You might find video stuff. Who knows? But if you had to add that to the network tab and you watch a video stream in from Level Up Tutorials, you're going to see that video is coming from Mux. And Mux, M-U-X, is the company here. What they do is a developer-first video. Now, I've worked a ton in video from all sorts of ways, and Mux really, really takes the cake for being able to be developer and code-focused without having to worry about where you're storing this, the types of files. I had to do so much work in the past with ingest, where you ingest a file, then you have to create 15 versions of it, and then you put it in an S3 bucket, and then you pick the right version, or you do all these different things, where Mux does all of that for you. You get your video uploaded, or you point it to a URL of an already existing S3 bucket or anything like that, and Mux just does the rest. It uploads it, it transcodes it, it gives the user the right version of the file at any given point, and it does streaming via the M3U8, which is really difficult to do on your own. Trust me, you need a service to do video streaming. It's not something you want to take on.
Yeah.
I've tried to do it. I tried to roll my own, and Mux was way, way, way easier. Head on over to mux.com/syntax. It is the video API first platform. It makes it extremely easy to build video apps for the web or for just about anywhere, to be honest. If you need video transcoded and streamed live video, thumbnails, GIF previews, just all sorts of cool stuff. Head on over to mux.com/syntax and sign up today. Whether you are serving a few dozen streams or a few million. Yes, that's right, million. Mux can handle it. So thank you so much for Mux for sponsoring.
Last tab here, and again, I don't know if this is in Chrome, but this is in Firefox. It will give you compatibility possible issues. So you just open up the compatibility tab. It will scan your website for any vendor prefixes or CSS properties that you are using that don't necessarily work on other options. Like if I just scanned Reddit here, it says it used the cursor 102 times, but that doesn't work on Firefox mobile. That's fine, right? Obviously, that doesn't really matter. So if you want to know really quickly, instead of just like going through all the settings of your website and then looking them up on Can I Use, you can just run this on your website and then pop up any possible issues. I imagine this is something that you run, you go through it quickly. Not a big deal, not a big deal. Oh, I didn't think about that. I'm using WebKit line clamp here. That doesn't necessarily work on Firefox, So that's kind of a cool tab as well.
Yeah. And that's something that's still important today, even though it's easy to forget. We have auto prefix and all that. It's still important to know what's compatible and what's not in your CSS. Absolutely.
Yeah, not even necessarily just prefixes. It's just like things in CSS that aren't available in other browsers.
Totally. Auto prefixer can only help you for things that have prefixes, believe it or not.
All right. I think that is all we have here for the inspector tab. It's amazing that you can go a whole hour just on talking about the different features of the DevTools, but getting good at DevTools is the same thing with like your editor. It's just like spending time knowing what is available and then spending time to learn how to use it will make you a much better developer in the long run. So if you know anything else that we didn't cover, make sure you tweet us at SyntaxFM.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we spent largely most of this episode in 2 tabs of the developer tools. I could probably spend several hours talking about this stuff because it is you're a craftsperson, right? And the better any craftsperson is with their tools, the better crafts they're probably going to be able to produce. Does that mean that, the person with the best tools wins? Or no, but if you're really good at your tools, it's going to help in every facet of building literally anything. So really spend some time in those dev tools, and you might learn a little something here or there about, potentially adding CSS classes really easily.
Let's move into some sick picks. Do you have any sick picks for me today, Scott?
I do. I have a sick pick, and this is going to be kind of funny. It's a YouTube channel that I've been really liking, and it's in the same vein as Technology Connections or any of those that are very like technical explanations of things.
Yeah.
I want to stress very clearly that I'm referring to one particular playlist from this user's channel, which I don't know how this got suggested to me. The channel is El Toro Ryan. So I guess Ryan and I have that in common. Ryan does these videos. They're called problematic roller coasters. And then he'll do the explanation of it. And what it is they're like 30-minute long videos where he explains specific roller coasters, not of which all are, even though the playlist is problematic roller coasters, not all of them are disasters or most of them aren't. But it's more like he'll spend 40 minutes going through this particular roller coaster, and he'll talk about the history that led to the design of it, the design influences, where they came from, the challenges they faced, the modifications they've made to it, the different physics and velocity and stuff behind it. And they're in depth, man. It is so cool to hear him talk about, all right, this company produced this one, and that led to producing this one. And here's what they learned from this version to the next version. And this version only lasted 2 years here because this thing happened. I'm not like crazy coaster head. I mean, I've been to Cedar Point a ton of times. Well, that's what's funny, Wes, is that this guy who does this YouTube channel and his friends are like, they're doing like blog videos where they're like, all right, the coaster head's coming. We're coming. We're going to hit this one and this one. It's like, I just ignore all those videos. I don't want any of that stuff, right? I just want this technical explanation about how these things work and their history and what they tried and didn't try. It's very much up the programming alley in terms of if you like that kind of debugging Technology Connections style of video. I found them to be pretty good. There's only like 12 or so of them, but I've been watching all of them. So that's my sick pick.
That is great. I'm going to sick pick a YouTube channel as well. It's the Post-Apocalyptic Inventor. This guy basically he's from Germany, and he goes into these scrap yards and pulls these like 50, 40, 50, 80-year-old tools out of a scrap pile, and then he refurbishes them, which I've always really enjoyed watching him do them. But then he did one on modernizing like 10, 15-year-old cordless tools, because that's starting to become a thing now where people have these nickel cadmium tools and then the batteries go on them and then they toss the tool and then go buy something new. And the thing about them is that you can just change the adapter on them with a little bit of work, and you can make them work on modern batteries, which is awesome. And I've done it with a couple of tools of my own. And he did a really good video showing like how it works and voltages and low voltage cutoff and pretty much everything that I would want to explain to somebody about what you need to know about doing this. Because sometimes you can go on, like I found a really nice cordless skill saw that had like an old battery, and I modified it to work on my DeWalt battery. And people are always like, oh, how did you do that? And I'm like, well, here's the things you need to know. But he did a really, really good video on doing this. So check it out. I'll put the link in the show notes, but it's the post-apocalyptic inventor.
Did you put any underglow on that thing when you're modding it?
Tools are like 18, 20 volt. And all the kind of cool car stuff is 12 volts. So you need to step it down.
Throw a little LED strip on there.
Yeah. Shameless plugs. I'll shamelessly plug all of my courses, wesboss.com/courses. I've got Master Gatsby, Beginner JavaScript. Also, I just published a guide, Beginner JavaScript Notes. It's 200,000 words, 1,500 screenshots, and on learning JavaScript through applicable way. It's totally free. So just go to wesboss.com/JavaScript for that as well.
Sick. Shamelessly plug the Level Up Tutorials courses. We're going to be doing a SvelteKit course and then an advanced SvelteKit course. So if you've heard me talk a lot about SvelteKit and you thought it might be interesting, head on over to leveluptutorials.com/pro. Sign up for the year, save 25%. And also we have team accounts. So if you're looking to get your team in on the mix, everybody wants to get down with some SvelteKit and some future tech, head on over to leveluptutorials.com/pro. Sign up your whole team today.
All right. That is it for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. We will catch you on Monday.
Peace.
Head on over to syntax.fm for a full archive of all of our shows. And don't forget to subscribe in your podcast player or drop a review if you like this show.